Nikki is a therapist, trainer and activist specializing in domestic abuse, gender-based violence and religious faith. Nikki works for several third sector organizations and in private practice. She's a co-founder of the Faith and VOG, Violence Against Women and Girls Coalition, and the founder of the Safe in Faith project with Caritas Westminster. She leads the Violence Against Women and Girls Committee of the National Board of Catholic Women and has worked with the Bishops' Conference of England and Wales and the Association of Christian Counsellors advising on domestic abuse. She's written the Guidance on Domestic Abuse for the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, and her books include Domestic Abuse in Church Communities, A Safe Pastoral Response. That's from Redemptorist Publications. Nikki is also fluent in British Sign Language and is the founder of Signs of Hope Deaf Counselling Service. Nikki, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. I'm sorry our time has been a little bit squeezed because of those two fantastic presentations before the break. So we will keep an eye on the time, and perhaps you and Father Sean can work it between you so that we still have time for a few questions towards the end. So Nikki, over to you. Thank you.
Just unmuting there. Can you all see my slides? I will try to be quick. I'm not going back to the first of all, thank you so much to Emma and to Liz for those incredibly powerful presentations. And I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm following that by talking about what the Catholic Church is doing and what the Catholic Church has done. And that in the face of such immeasurable pain that's been described, that's a very difficult task, and I just want to acknowledge that in no way do we feel we have all the answers yet, and that there's a long path ahead of us in terms of creating a response that matches the level of need. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things that have been going on. I'm just going to start very quickly by talking about somebody that I met a while ago called Maggie. That's not her real name. And that she is, and women like her that I've been working with are the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. Maggie was subjected to abuse by her husband for nearly 30 years. She turned to her parish priest, and her parish priest told her to think about what her role was, what her responsibility was for what happened to her, to pray to become a better wife, and to thank God for her suffering, because these things are sent to make us more holy. She was very frightened at home. She turned to her local domestic abuse service, and her local domestic abuse service told her to give up her religion. She didn't feel able to do that, so she went back home and spent another 5 years being subjected to abuse before she finally found some support that understood her spirituality and understood her Catholicism, as well as understanding the abuse. What we know from research, and some of that's been touched on already, and from clinical experience, is that faith and religion can be a source of huge strength, but it can also be weaponized. And when someone is a person with a strong faith, that's the most powerful weapon that you can possibly have to use against them. We know from research that survivors of domestic abuse, if they are a person of faith, any faith, they do tend to stay significantly longer with their abuse. We also know that they do benefit from support that is faith literate, that understands their spiritual needs. We know that people, if they turn to their faith leaders, that the responses they get can be extremely varied. I have worked with women who've had unbelievably helpful and wonderful responses from their parish priests. I've also worked with women like Maggie. And we, I can't see, I've got something, I can't see what I've written at the bottom there because it's being covered up. Apologies for that. I'm going to move on to the next slide. You'll have a chance to have those slides afterwards. Some of the questions that I find myself dealing with as a therapist when I'm dealing with women of faith are things like, is it a sin to leave? Do I have to forgive? What is the meaning of forgiveness? Can I forgive and also make myself safe? Is this a path that God has chosen for me? What is the meaning of this suffering? And how can I find justice? And what does justice mean? These are questions, I'm not going to go into how we explore them and how we answer them, but these are questions that I think need a certain amount of expertise in order to tackle them confidently. And the vast majority of people working in the domestic abuse sector, I think, probably don't have that confidence to tackle questions like this. So they end up unanswered, and they end up people with a strong spirituality end up feeling that their needs aren't really being met from the people that are supporting them outside of church contexts. This is a list of things. Every single one of those statements are genuine statements that my clients have been told, not by their perpetrators, but by the people that they turned to for help. And as I said, there are some of them that have had immensely wonderful support from their parish priests. But this is really important that we understand that all of these things are actually acts of spiritual abuse, that people might believe that they're being helpful because they don't have a full understanding of the real nature of domestic abuse. And that's why I think those presentations that we had earlier are so important, because I think a lot of people with the best intentions are working on some misconceptions about the true nature of domestic abuse. And so the most fundamental thing that we can do is to understand what the real experience is before we even think about how we're going to respond. The history of how the Catholic Church has responded to this, I can't even begin without mentioning the National Board of Catholic Women, because the National Board has been speaking about this issue for decades, way before anybody else was addressing it. Real pioneers, and I know some of them are here today, and they're still guiding this work. There's also been the Catholic Bishops' Conference about 15 years ago, set up a domestic abuse working group, but that was in response to a domestic homicide review because a Catholic woman had been killed. And the domestic homicide review highlighted the role that faith communities can play in preventing further deaths. In response to that, they set up the domestic abuse working group, which was later passed on to the CSAN, Caritas Social Action Network, this domestic abuse forum, now the Domestic Abuse Alliance, which is why we're here today. And then something I'm going to be talking about, which is the Safe in Faith project that I've set up with Caritas Westminster. So currently, the National Board of Catholic Women, we have a Violence Against Women and Girls org committee, And we're focusing on policy development, on research, and developing guidance. We're answerable to the Bishops' Conference, but really that guidance is for the wider church as well. The National Board produced a domestic abuse booklet. I think that was in 2020. It was the second edition was released, and that is available for free on the website. So do have a look at that. And then on a level of more practical support, what we've been doing with Caritas Westminster is developing the Safe in Faith project. Then what we're looking at doing is upskilling people to provide really safety focused and trauma informed support within the church that understands people's faith needs. And we've been doing that with support from other agencies. I'm a very strong believer in working collaboratively and learning from each other. So these are the organizations that have really inspired and supported the very earliest stages of development. If you're not familiar with Restored, it's a Christian organization that does some fantastic work. We've got training packages. They've got an online survivors network. We're working very, very closely with them. There's the Black Churches Domestic Abuse Forum. There's Jewish Women's Aid, are an amazing organization, and they've really inspired a lot of the work that we're trying to achieve now. And the Faith and Borg Coalition, which I don't have time to talk about today, but I would really urge you to have a look at their website. So what we are currently developing is we're hoping by the end of this year, we're going to be able to launch a directory of trauma-informed, safety-focused Catholic leaders. So that's clergy, that's religious sisters. It's really important to have a gender balance there, because obviously some survivors might not feel comfortable talking to male. The spiritual directors, who are all trained, who have that real understanding of the true experience of domestic abuse, coercive control, and can signpost, but most importantly, can give that message that God wants you to be safe, that this is not something that God wants you to suffer. Also, a directory of trauma-informed and faith-literate counsellors and psychotherapists, and that's an interfaith. We've got an online network, so we can share information. And next week, our first training is starting. So we're training up helping professionals, but also some of the training is more specific just for counsellors and psychotherapists. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have that directory as well. We're also looking to create some peer support next year. That's very, very important as well. And training for people who work in parishes and at diocesan level. We are very aware that, we're not able to meet all these needs. And I'm sure hearing some of those presentations earlier, it's very clear that some of this can feel very overwhelming. So we're very much aware that we need to work collaboratively, we need multidisciplinary approaches, but what we're doing is filling a gap, which is the gap that recognizes people's spiritual needs. So these are some of the places that we are working with other organizations, creating links. Sometimes there will be organizations working specifically with other faiths. So we've got Jewish Women's Aid and Sikh Women's Aid, for example. Local domestic abuse services. We've also got some organizations that work on very specific areas with very specific groups. And in the light of what Liz was talking about, there's one of our colleagues has set up an organization called Paramilli, which is supporting mothers who are going through the family court system. And I'm involved as well with some amazing colleagues in developing an organisation called Project Lighthouse, which we are hoping to launch in September. And that's going to be providing therapeutic support to mothers who've had their children as a result of the failures in the system. There are also organisations that we're working with, like the Latin American Women's Rights Service, South and Black Sisters, that work specifically with certain groups of women and their needs. We're also recognising that the needs that people have, and I talk about women, we do also very much support men, but we are very aware that the majority of people experience that their needs are very different depending on what stage they're at in their journey. And that the way we would be signposting people would be very different at different stages in their journey, whether they're at a stage where they're just trying to work out and recognize through all the gaslighting and confusion that can come from the gaslighting and confusion that comes from coercive control, trying to sort of name that experience, really, that can be a really hugely important part of the process. And then if somebody is at a safety seeking stage, their needs are going to be very different from if they're at the healing stage, which is when perhaps most of the trauma has been in the past, but they need time and spiritual support, psychological support to help them deal with the ongoing effects of the trauma. And then positive living, sometimes for some people, that can involve having the opportunity to help others, and that's where the peer support options will be important. I just want to touch on what it means to be trauma informed. I could, speak for the whole 2 hours on this. It's a really big area, but I find a lot of it's a bit of a buzzword, and a lot of people like to call themselves trauma informed, and there's a lot of disagreement about what that actually means. For me, one of the best descriptions of trauma informed care I've ever heard was from Emma, who I'm not sure if she's still with us or if she's had to go. And basically what she said was, if you take all the elements of a coercively controlling relationship, of somebody that's coercively controlling, if you take all of those elements and reverse all of them, do the opposite of all of them, that's the foundation of trauma-informed care. I've never found a description that's better than that. But these are some of the things that we're trying to be aware of when we're providing a trauma-informed approach, and that's both in terms of the therapeutic approaches, when we're doing the training with counsellors, psychotherapists and other healthcare professionals, but also with the clergy and faith leaders, that it's really important to have a trauma-informed approach there as well. So the training for Catholic faith leaders, which is starting later this month, is basically sort of that deep understanding of the experience of domestic abuse, but also what that means in the context of Catholic spirituality. An understanding of trauma and trauma-informed care, and then how to use the signposting tool that we've created, but also how to support themselves, because this is quite hard stuff to be working with. And I think there's perhaps not a culture among particularly Catholic clergy to be aware of looking after your own needs. And that's something that we're really encouraging, is as part of the trauma-informed approach, is what it means to actually look after myself and avoid burnout, avoid overwhelm when I'm dealing with these situations, so that I can then be available to support in the best possible way. Very, very similar is the training for counsellors and psychotherapists and healthcare professionals. So the first 3 modules really are open to all helping professionals, and again, that's that real understanding of the real experience of domestic abuse, busting some of those myths that are so common and really unhelpful. And what that means in the context of the wider context of different faiths, because it's an interfaith group. And again, working with trauma in trauma-informed ways. And then the final module is really just for the counsellors and psychotherapists, because that's looking at some sort of the latest understandings of therapeutic techniques that are most helpful when working with these survivors. We're going to be looking at peer support, and we're actually at the moment having conversations with people with lived experience to find out what it is that would have been most helpful for you at the time that had been available. And there are all sorts of amazing ideas about coming together, doing arts and crafts together, maybe setting up a choir, also having maybe a one-to-one buddy to help you if it's been years since you've been able to go out socially. It can be quite overwhelming sometimes to do that. So somebody, if you just want to go for a drink, to have somebody there with you to help give you confidence to get back out there socially again and engaging in life again. Also, for some people, there's been a suggestion of having an annulment buddy for people who are going through the annulment process. Somebody who's already been through that, support them navigating that process. So this has been a bit of a whistle stop because I wanted to make it short because I know that we're short on time. But I do urge you to have a look at our website. There it is. Do jot that down. And that's if you want to follow us on Twitter. We do have some training. A lot of it's free. The stuff that's not free, it's very produced and accessible. There's also a lot of information just on the website if you want to know more about signposting and links to more information that's helpful. So have a look at that, and do get in touch if you'd like to get more involved or if you're interested in any of our training. We are very aware that these are the first steps in terms of responding to such a huge need that we've heard about this morning. But we really welcome all of you to join us on this journey. And thank you very much for your time.